Hey everyone, this is week 2 of the cardiovascular system and blood. So last week we did the anatomy standards. So you looked at the internal and external parts of the human heart. You traced the flow of blood through the heart, which you'll have to do both of those things on the summative for this week. And then you also did the physiology standards. You looked at the types of blood cells. Explain what a blood type is, what it can tell you about a person's antigens and antibodies, and why it's important to understand for blood transfusions. And then the last thing you did was explain the phenomena of erythroblastosis fetalis, which you also need to explain on the test. So I made videos explaining the cardiovascular web quest and the ABO-RH exploration, which should have been either posted in Classroom or I posted as a private comment on your assignment, so make sure you go back and watch those. All right, and then this week we are going to do medical application. So you will learn how to interpret a complete blood cell count test and interpret an EKG reading. Okay, so here's our weekly plan. So for Monday, watch this video, explore the weekly plan, and then do the complete blood cell count lab. And I know I started to explain this last week because it was going to be your assignment for Friday before I found out about the rule about how Fridays are supposed to be teachers' planning days. So we're going to bump this up to today. So make sure you read this background information, read about the types of blood cells, so platelets, which the scientific name for platelet is thrombocyte. Platelets are responsible for blood clotting. Red blood cells, the scientific name is erythrocytes, literally means red cells, and those are primarily responsible for delivering gases where they belong. And then white blood cells, also known as leukocytes, which are responsible for immunity like your T cells and your B cells. Okay, read about the blood cell count test here. Look at this table showing normal blood values for the 3 types of blood cells. If your blood cell count is low or high, read about these causes. And then read about our procedures. We only have 2 patients to look at. The first patient, here is their blood smear. So you're going to count how many blood cells you see in the grid. These are red blood cells. These are the white blood cells. And then these little guys, those are the platelets. So count how many are in the grid. Also make note of the additional observations noted by the pathologist. Same thing for patient 2. Count their blood cells. Look at the additional observations. And then this is where you type in the number of blood cells. And then you're going to multiply it by a different number depending on what blood cell it is. So make sure you pay attention to that number. 100,000, 1,000, and 10,000. And then after you do that, you'll be able to compare those values to the normal range in this table. Whoops. Uh-oh. And then after you do that, this last table, table 2, so you're just going to write a simple summary of your findings. So for example, if the red blood cells were high, state it was above the normal range. And then in this box, you're going to hypothesize your diagnosis. So go back and look at this table again. If your white blood cells were too high, read about what might be causing those blood cell counts to be higher than normal. And then also pay attention to the additional observation because that might give you a clue. All right, I think these are pretty easy to figure out what's wrong with these 2 patients. And then on the test, I'm going to have another patient with a different blood cell count, and you'll have to do the same thing. So this is good practice. Okay, so that's Monday. Tuesday, you are going to learn how to interpret an EKG. Show what that looks like. So there's 2 parts. Part A, you're going to learn how to interpret one. Part B, I have a practice, or I think 2 practice ones for you to do, and I'll make answer keys for both of these. So I'm sure you guys have seen, if you've ever gone to visit somebody in the hospital, you've seen this screen. So this is a screen that shows a patient's vitals. So the one that we're going to be concerned about is this top reading right here. This is an EKG or an ECG. You'll see it both ways depending on what country you're in. This blue line here, this is the amount of oxygen in the patient's capillaries. And then this bottom line right here, this is the respiratory rate of a patient. So how many breaths per minute. And this is actually, I took this picture. My grandpa was in the hospital a while ago, and I took this picture. This is his vital screen. So he had a pacemaker put in, which is why his EKG looks a little bit weird. And that's actually the level 5 question. I'm going to ask you to look at a patient's EKG that just had a pacemaker put in and a normal EKG, and then you predict what the pacemaker controls. All right, so part A. Read the background information. Read about the conduction system in the heart. There are 3 primary components you need to know about: the sinus node, the atrioventricular node, or AV node for short, and the His-Purkinje system, which are these yellow lines right here that control the movement of the ventricles. So the SI node, that's where the electrical system starts, triggers the AV node, which then triggers the His-Purkinje system. Okay, so make sure you read this stuff. So these different waves and the different intervals correlate to a different part of the heart beating. Obviously, the higher the peak, the more electricity, so we can infer that the higher peaks relate to the ventricles, the lower peaks relate to the atria because they are smaller. And then this is optional if you want to watch this video. It just kind of shows you a human heart and what the different peaks and valleys relate to. I think it will help you. And you're going to go to this website. So this is a practical website. I think it's from a nursing program. It goes through the different components of the EKG reading. So you're going to click on the basics. And then there are 11 parts to this. It goes pretty fast. So you're going to click on each one of these parts. And then that correlates to a different box here. So in the Q&A, so just give me a quick answer here. And then sometimes in the diagram column, I'll have something for you to interpret. So for example, when you determine what rhythm is, what heart rhythm is, and how you can figure that out from an EKG reading. So you'll look at this patient's EKG reading. Is it regular? What is the heart rhythm? You'll determine the RR and the PP intervals, and it will tell you how to do that on that website. So go through these. Tells you what all of those components mean. And then that is all you're doing for Tuesday. And then Wednesday, so we're going to apply those that knowledge and look at some actual printouts, some EKG printouts. So I have 2 patients, patient A, so here's their EKG reading. And then this same table, this is what's going to be on the summative. So this is good practice. So practice calculating the intervals, beats per minute, the heart rate. Practice looking at the P waves, the PR intervals, the QRS interval, T waves, so on and so forth. Tell me if it's normal, if it's consistent, based on what you learned in part A. And then this last one, the diagnosis. So overall, what might be wrong with this patient? So any weird things that you see that you make note of here, look at what part of the heart might not be working, and then you'll be able to infer, is it the SA node? Is it the AV node? Is it the His-Purkinje fibers? What's going on in that person's heart? What's not firing correctly? Same thing, part B. Here's their readout. Do the same thing. And then give me a quick diagnosis. What do you think's going on? It's okay. I know you guys, you're not cardiologists. You're not going to be able to give a clear diagnosis. But you're just going to use your inference skills. So tell me, what do you think? What's your guess? And then on the summative, I'll have somebody's EKG reading with atrial fibrillation. So if you remember, you watched the video at the beginning of this unit about Brandon. It's going to be a readout with somebody with AFib that you'll interpret. Okay, and then also on Wednesday, I'll have an optional Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock, which those are my office hours. And I'll make sure to record this one if you can't pop in. So if you have any questions about this unit, if you just want to talk through some things, we can do that then. And then Thursday is your summative. It's pretty short, but I'm not going to make that due till Friday. So if you need an extra day to complete that, that's fine. But I think you should be able to get it done Thursday, but I know with the level 5 questions, sometimes it gets a little bit lengthy. So you'll have an extra day to do that if needed. And then after this unit, we have the respiratory system, the digestive system, and then the reproductive system. So from here on out, the units are going to be pretty quick. So the summatives are going to be more like quizzes. So go really fast. All right. Let me know if you guys have questions.